All right, hey everybody, it's Evan from devisend.com. So in the last video, I showed all of our folders that we have over here. And right now I currently have app.svelte open right now. And if you remember, our app.svelte is in our source folder, and our app.svelte is a svelte component. Now within our source folder, there is going to be a ton of different components that we're going to have, or maybe you might only have a few, depends on your project. But basically inside your source folder is where you're going to be doing the bulk of your coding. Now, the way Svelte knows how to compile components is by having the extension of your component be .svelte. So by doing so, you are telling the compiler that you want to compile this component. And if you remember from the last video, inside each component, we have three different sections. We have our script section up top, our main section here, which is going to have our HTML elements, and our style section down here, which is going to have our CSS styling. And this is the boilerplate that came from the repo that we cloned. However, I'm actually going to remove a lot of this stuff, and we're going to start from scratch so we can look at each individual thing and learn as we go. So I'm actually going to go ahead and delete all of our styling here. I'm going to get rid of our export let name, and I'm going to get rid of everything inside our main here. All right, so let's simply create a hello world application. So I'm going to create an h1 tag here. I'm going to put hello world. Save this, and then we're going to go to our browser. Make sure you have this app running. If you don't have the app running, just go ahead and type npm run dev and it'll boot it up for you. All right, so now we can see hello world up at the top left. So now let's go ahead and add some styling to that. So to add styling to our h1 tag, all we have to do is say h1, and I'm going to change the font size to be, let's say, 72 pixels. And then let's go ahead and align our text to be centered. So I'm going to do text align center. Now if we go back to our browser, we're going to see hello world in the center here. All right, so now let's go ahead and create a name variable up at the top here. So I'm going to say let name. I'm going to set it equal to world. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete world from our h1 tag. And instead, I'm going to do curly braces. And inside these curly braces, I'm going to type out our variable name, which is name. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this. And now we see in the browser that it still says hello world. And that's because we are using our name variable that we set up in our script up here. And we're basically inserting it into our HTML element. So if I were to change this to be, instead of world, if I were to change it to be Evan, and we'll go ahead and save that, it's now going to say hello Evan. And just like we use these curly braces to control our text, we can also use them to control attributes that are attached to different elements. So for example, I'm going to add a image tag here. I'm going to give it a source attribute, and up at the top here, I'm going to create a variable for that source. I'm just going to name it src. And for our source, I'm actually going to give it the directory of our favicon.png over here. So all I have to type is favicon.png, and I'm going to go ahead and add that source variable from up here into our source attribute. And you'll notice in VS Code it actually gives us a yellow squiggly underline, and this is because we are actually missing an alt tag for our image. So Svelte automatically detects if we're missing different things that we need and gives us a warning. In this case, we're missing the alt attribute, and the alt attribute is very helpful for making things accessible to the broadest possible user base. So for people using screen readers that won't be able to see the images, the alt attribute helps describe what exactly the image is showing. So let's go ahead and add that alt attribute right now. And I'm just going to say svelte logo. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and save this, and you'll see that the yellow underline is gone. And now we see the logo over here on the left. So let's go ahead and actually center that. So I'm actually going to add a styling to our main here, and I'm going to display this as flex and set the flex direction to be column, just so everything goes from top to bottom. And then I'm going to say align items center, like so. And now we're going to see everything centered here. All right, so I'm just going to make everything a little bit bigger. So now you can see we can use curly braces to insert variables into text, or we can use them for attributes on elements. And there's actually a quick little shorthand we can do for this src here. So instead of saying src equals src, we can actually just use curly braces src, and it will be the same as saying src equals src because it is the same exact name. But this is only the case because we have this name to src, and if the name and value are the same, then we can use a shorthand like this. Otherwise, if I were to use use something like CRD and CRD here and hit save, this won't work. So let's go ahead and change that back. All right, now let's do something fun. So I'm going to create a H3 tag here. I'm going to enter counter colon, and then here we're going to insert another variable. We're going to call this count. I'm going to set this equal to 0, and we're just going to insert this variable into our HTML element here. So now if we go to our browser, we can see counter is 0. Now I'm going to increase the size of the H3 so it's a little bit more easier to see. Let's make it 38 pixels. All right, so now we can see our counter on here. It's currently set to 0. Now let's go ahead and add a button, and this button is going to say add 1 to counter. Now we can see our button on here. I'm actually going to make this screen a little bit bigger just so it's easy to see. All right, and now when we click on our button, it's not adding anything to the counter yet. So let's go ahead and add that functionality right now. The first thing we're going to do is add in a event handler to our button. And this event handler is going to be on colon click, and I'm going to set this equal to a function that's going to increment our counter by 1. So to do this, we're going to use 2 curly braces here, and I'm going to go up to our script, and we're going to create a function. So I'm just going to create an arrow function here. We're going to call this increment counter, like so. And every time we call this function, we are going to increase our counter. So I'm going to say count plus equals 1. And now if we go back to our on click here, we're just going to pass in the name of the function, which in this case is increment counter. There is something to note though. You do not want to use the parentheses to invoke the function. Otherwise, JavaScript will look at that and instantly run that function at build time. You only want to pass the reference to the function, which is just the name of the function. You do not want to call it like so. You do not want to do that. So now that we have this, let's go ahead and try it out and see if it works. I'm going to go ahead and click the button. You see the counter now says 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. And you'll notice everything is updating live. There's no refreshing of the page or anything like that. Everything is updating in real time. So this right here, this on colon click, this is Svelte syntax. This isn't traditional JavaScript. This is Svelte compiling this to be a on-click event, and we're simply passing a reference to our function here. And all of this is updating in real time with no refreshing of the page or anything like that. And that is one of the super cool features that you can get with Svelte and other reactive frameworks, or in this case, a compiler. In the next video, we're going to go over handling user inputs and binding those values to our variables up here. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below, or you can join the DevAscend Discord server, and I'm sure someone will be able to help you out there. That's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.